Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today we have something extra special. We have two special guests. The first one is T.R. Ludwig, and he's been on the show before. We'll put that link in the show notes. And he brought along the co-founder of Brooklyn Solar Works, Gaelen McKee. Welcome, dudes. What's happening?
Yeah. How are you, dude?
I'm doing pretty good. I was in Brooklyn a few months ago doing a class. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. Most of the time it's really cool, and then sometimes the traffic just like absolutely bums you out. But
Oh yeah, I was just taking the subway. So like rush hour, that's when you get around real fast. We got lots of trains. Yep.
Yeah, hard to move solar panels that way, though.
Yeah, so I remember when we were talking before, what you guys were doing was kind of neat. You're in a place where there's like a high concentration of people, probably like the highest in the country, and you don't have a whole lot of roof space compared to how much living space. So you got all these buildings that are 20 stories tall and things like that. And there's a lot of stuff up there, like air conditioners and heating units and all kinds of New York stuff up there that probably we don't want to get too much into, I don't know. Whatever you guys are into. So you make canopies, right? That go over the rooftops. And so you could put the solar over an air conditioner, and that's pretty cool. Am I right? Do I remember right?
Absolutely. Yep. You most certainly remember right. And yeah, that business has started, from very much fledgling, very much sort of a resi solution that we're just looking to solve an issue here in New York City for, flat roof brownstone and row house owners. And that's blossomed into a whole other company that's got multiple different product offerings, all canopy or, carport related. But yeah, we've been able to certainly deploy many of those canopies around New York City and now throughout the country. And, we're excited to offer some of our new products to the market as well, and then, ship them around the country.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Cameron Feary, I don't know if you know him, but I know he works with your product too and has good things to say. So I was also thinking, like, how are you going to put one of your canopies on the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world over there in Dubai? Because you got a couple of problems. It's very pointy, and then Tom Cruise is kind of in the way.
Tom Cruise can install it, maybe.
Okay.
I'm on the payroll.
Yeah, he's not afraid of heights, that's for sure. So do you have a Burj Khalifa solution,
Right off the top of our heads, no, and I'm sure we could come up with one if they send us the drawings of the building.
Right. I mean, I will say the solution is quite nimble. And so, even if they could give us 20 by 20 square or something like that, it's quite likely we could get a A-frame canopy up there and, wind loads on that.
So I'll just get a chainsaw and cut off the top 100 feet of the building, and there you probably get 20 by 20 because it's so pointy.
Yeah, that would be, the pointiness might be the challenge. Maybe we go vertical.
Yeah, okay. So maybe you could kind of explain, your solution. And is it something that you sell to other installers, or you guys mostly do it yourself? And are you mostly focused on the New York area, or are people allowed to do it in Chicago?
Yeah, I'll let Gaelen answer that.
So, historically, for the first 8 or so years of our existence, we were our own best customer. So we did the majority of the installs of our own solar canopies, but last year that actually flipped. So now we're selling more solar canopies to other installers than we're installing ourselves, which is a good sign of the trajectory of the racking company. But yeah, I think we've probably deployed somewhere around over 1,000 in New York City. That's by far where they're the most condensed, but we've shipped them all over the US at this point, even a few outside of the US to the Caribbean here and there.
Great. Okay. So maybe you could explain what this canopy is and looks like and the proposition that you have for people. Like, I guess it's like you can put solar where you otherwise couldn't. I mean, that'd be one of the propositions, I guess.
Definitely. So for the New York market, New York City specifically, we have one of our canopy designs is very much oriented around flat roof New York City. That's the A-frame canopy. It's the one we've kind of built the most of over the years. And that's a rooftop application. We do have a few other designs that are more for the ground. A cantilever application that's pretty similar to other cantilever carports out there, but it's made out of aluminum. And then we have also a wood canopy that's a little bit more of a residential aesthetic, but that one's pretty neat. And we're just starting to ship a bunch of those all over. So that would also be a ground application more so than the rooftop, although you could put it on the roof.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any like wood grounding lugs. How do you ground wood, huh?
You don't really need to.
Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding. You can't ground something that doesn't really carry current. And so that's kind of interesting too. You don't see people with anything that's wood. Do you go after things like the UL listing for racks and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we're getting it. That one's actually underway, getting UL listed, but it has the same rail as all our other applications. So there's still a bonding pathway between the panel and the rail and whatever your end ground point is. But the wood itself, like the columns, yeah, you don't need to ground those columns. But the entire array, which sits on top, is grounded, yeah.
I remember when I was over in Brooklyn a few months ago doing a class, there was somebody somehow bought them some end clamps that were not good, like they were just bad. And so the other instructor, he was very creative and he took some 2x4s and cut them up and made wooden end clamps. I thought that was kind of cool. It was just for training to kind of show these guys, what an end clamp did. So maybe you could come up with some wooden end clamps. I guess kind of what you're doing, like there's the unique thing, I guess, is the rooftop solution. Is that mostly what you're doing, or are you doing carports and other canopies too a lot?
Yeah, mostly what we're doing is rooftop. I mean, certainly for Brooklyn Solar Works, our installation operations, we're pretty much exclusively doing rooftop. We get the occasional carport here or there, but we're doing 2 or 3 or 4 rooftop canopies a week. But a lot of the folks who are just buying product from us, it's probably 50-50 rooftop versus ground at this point.
Okay. And the rooftop ones too would give you some good shading and airflow. Do people hang out under them, or are they the kind of roofs that you don't hang out on, or probably just combination?
Yeah, it's funny because like when we first started, we had this image of like a utopia on top of all these brownstones, nice garden underneath and the barbecue and family underneath the canopy. And the reality is most folks don't use it that way. They just don't go up on their roof. But it does enable that. And so we've started to see more folks start to put a green roof underneath, a seating area. We have one at our headquarters here that all our employees automatically just kind of go underneath to hang out. And there it is in real life.
You're watching on YouTube. We got one in the background through the window there.
Yeah, exactly. And so it does create this pretty usable space on the rooftop. And that was part of the concept when we first started. And it took a little while to kind of seed that, but we're definitely seeing more and more people, use that as an added benefit. Obviously they're mostly going solar to save money and, do something good for the environment, but it also does activate some of these rooftop spaces in a way that most other canopies wouldn't. Sometimes there's cost prohibitive or structural issues there, but we built the canopy so that it can kind of rock and roll with most flat roof buildings here in the city.
Yeah, I imagine with wind loading and tall buildings, there would be some engineering involved. Just, as how close you are to the edge of the building and what the wind will be. And when you're on a tall building, the wind coming up the side, all that kind of stuff. So you probably have relationships with engineers that help with that.
No, just kidding. We've done pretty extensive engineering on the canopy. We've got multiple relationships with great structural engineers who do a ton of work in the solar industry. I'm sure a bunch of the people listening have probably worked with them. But yeah, it's pretty critical that these things stay put,
What I do is I just buy the engineer stamp on Alibaba for $5. It kind of works.
That is a route. So I can tell you that's not the route we've taken with this product, but it is a route.
About how high over the roof is it? Is it a range of how high you can put it?
Yeah, for New York fire code, we got to be 9 feet high.
That's pretty high.
Exactly. And that's just for head clearance. So the panels themselves are generally like 10 feet.
Yeah, and then you'll be tilted up, so one end will even be higher than that. So what are you going up to, like 12 feet on one side?
Yeah, generally between like 9 and 12 feet, I'd say, is where
Wow.
we're landing.
Wow, that's pretty high and pretty cool, and probably takes some engineering. And how are the building departments? Are they giving you trouble much, or?
No, I mean, they actually love it because it complies with the fire code, at
Cool.
least in the city. There's other jurisdictions that have different opinions about how high they want canopies to be. But in New York City, the design was purpose built to meet the fire codes right off the bat and like right out of the box. And so we kind of thought like at the beginning, we'd see this issue of them just like not understanding why we were proposing a canopy, but it wasn't at all true. We got, even in our first systems, our first products, we were able to get permits like pretty much right away. Because
Awesome.
they just saw that, it complied and there's really not to push back on.
That's great. I want one. So I am building a solar training center, and I am underneath this deck that's probably something like 400 or 500 square feet. How do I get one? I guess it'll go over the deck, I'm sure, right? Like,
Yeah, definitely. So you can just email us the address, and if you have a layout, generally we ask folks for like a helioscope or aurora or whatever they've done a preliminary design with to send over a bird's eye view of their layout, and then we'll kind of take it from there and try to optimize for cost and maximum amount of capacity. And then we'll shoot back generally with a nice little 3D rendering and a price, and then hopefully we can move forward, Sean. I don't know.
all right.
The drip
Well, I'm
camera.
a strong believer in reusing old solar modules that are free. And so how about for a layout, I'll just like lay them down on the deck. And I'll lay them down on the deck, and then I could stand up on the roof above it, or get a drone, or just leave it out there until Google flies over the next time. And that'll be my layout. You think that'll work?
Yeah, I like it. Very analog. That's how I think too. I'm like, let me just lay it all out and I don't know if it fits or not.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSEAN, that's Solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I remember like one time there was this guy in Hawaii where they kind of do things laid back, and his layout was crayons. So he just like went up there on the roof with a solar module and just started tracing around it. And then just you moved that solar module around, traced all around it, and then installed the system that way. Yeah. I'm not sure if he even had the permit yet, but that's called hanging loose.
Hang loose.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Wish New York City electrical inspectors were as loose in some ways,
Yeah, I know that New York City is like really weird with electrical codes. You're on the 2008 National Electrical Code. So that's a long time ago. And so I guess though there's a ton of amendments, and you still have to do things like rapid shutdown with these.
Yeah. Actually, they just updated it, believe it or not. Finally.
Oh, they're not on 2008 anymore?
Yeah, they've evolved.
No, it must be recent because it's still on all the maps, like from NFPA and stuff. So
Yeah.
what version of the code are they on now?
I want to say 2020.
I think it's 2020. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that was kind of a 12-year jump.
Giant leap.
Yeah.
forward.
Uh-huh.
Giant leap. So another 15, 20 years, they'll probably update it.
Does that make things easier or more difficult maybe it is easier in a way because you don't have to learn new things as often.
Yeah, I mean, it does. We're just kind of behind in a lot of ways, and we're also very special in a lot of ways. Like the grid voltage here is 208 on, standard residential buildings in a lot of the parts of the city as well. So there's just like funky stuff that, you gotta be able to deal with. And it most certainly is not going to evolve as fast as like a lot of the other, fire code requirements and also electrical requirements. So, we gotta thread that needle, and that's just part of being dedicated to the New York City market.
Does Thomas Edison still have some DC power plants there, old DC grid on your block? Shovel some coal?
Not on our block, but on Pearl Street, there's still some artifacts. And
Oh, yeah?
sometimes you find those artifacts in people's houses, they'll be, 60, 70-year-old service panels and that kind of stuff. And like, ooh, man, we're going to have to swap this out.
Uh-huh. Okay, great. Yeah. So let's see, maybe tell us some other things about your company and, what you're looking for to like how you want to grow, and do you want to do more selling of your racking systems or installing yourself, or just kind of keep it a combination? How are you going to take over the world?
I don't know if we're going to take it that far, but we're definitely interested to sell more of our racking systems. I finally feel like we've got most of our ducks in a row to offer an array of different products and, make sure that what we're selling people has proved to be a useful application, and we've put a bunch of them together ourselves. So I think we're going to continue to try to increase the racking sales, and who knows where that gets taken, because for whatever reason we have a hard time saying no. So when somebody calls up and asks for some crazy application, be it like a floating canopy or something like that, we're just looking
I want one. I have a lake.
Yeah, there you go. Your backdrop would go floating canopy out there. So we're, luckily still pretty nimble and enjoy, I think, the early stages of design and development of these products. So who knows where that ends up, but.
All right. Okay, that's cool. So do you have like a floating canopy that somebody did? It's like, I guess you have to it's sort of like a dock people can hang out on.
I don't know. It's kind of classified information at the moment.
Does it come with a barbecue?
It may come with a boat.
It's an add-on.
Yeah.
And so making a racking company too, so you got lots of, metal that you're dealing with. Are you like forming this metal locally, or how do you do that?
Oh, yeah. So most of what we use are extrusions, aluminum extrusions, and we extrude everything in the US, mainly in New Jersey, some out of New Hampshire, and then bigger extrusions out of the Midwest. But that's all coming from American extruders. And then we'll cut that up and weld it in Rhode Island, also in America. And do form some stuff too, but mainly it's cut and welded. And there's some of our products have kind of bending and forming involved, but most of it's just cutting and welding.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, even before there were all the tariffs and things, that the inverters and the PV modules, a lot of times they're made in different countries, but a lot of times the racking systems are made in America. And I guess because maybe they're big and, shipping, and it's easy enough to just do that thing that little kids do with Play-Doh, and they put it in this thing and they crank it and it comes out, and that's called extruding, I guess.
Yeah.
And then like, how do you decide how to extrude something? And I guess like it fits on the head of a bolt, or like, are you just sitting there going like, I got a cool shape, and you wake up in the middle of the night and go like, let's do this shape?
Yeah, that's not too far off, honestly. I installed for a long time, so basically anything that we could do to make the installation process easier. I'd go back to the office and draw it on paper and then put it into CAD and then send it to the extruder and get a die made. And then they'd send me some samples, and usually it worked. And sometimes it doesn't work, and I've wasted a couple $1,000s, but then you send them a new drawing and hopefully the second time it works. And it's a lot of trial and error, but we've been at it for a while now. So we've gotten the process a little bit more streamlined.
Have you ever thought of practicing with Play-Doh? Like you could extrude some of that and, get your rails all set up, got to kind of be open-minded.
3-year-old daughter might be able to help out on the R&D.
I'm always telling her not to play with the Play-Doh on the carpet, but maybe it's, misguiding her skills.
She wants to get kids.
Yeah, I think child labors are good when it's your kids.
Yeah, it's your
I mean, they don't want like to raise lazy, spoiled brats or anything like that.
Yeah. Pay them in food.
Mm-hmm. So what's the most jacked up rack you ever did? Like how high? How high do you get?
Probably like 20 feet.
Wow. And what was it like? What kind of application was that? Like on the ground?
It was actually on a roof. It just had really high requirements. So I think one side is closer to like 17 feet, and then it was about 20 feet on the other side. And that was just long posts. So, columns that were about 20 feet tall.
How do you make that strong, or what kind of columns?
Those were 6x6 by 1/4 inch aluminum posts.
And did you come up with the aluminum posts, or I guess it was one of your jobs?
Yeah, no, it's all designed and engineered by us. So it's pretty similar to, we do a lot of what we call a post and truss design. So it's aluminum trusses that bolt together to a post. Same style, just really tall.
Uh-huh. I remember my friend Tony Diaz, good friend of mine over here in California Bay Area. In about 2008, he came up with some kind of solar canopy, and that was back in the days where we had rebates that were like $2 or $3 a watt with the California Solar Initiative. And I remember it was a SunPower system. It was in downtown Oakland, Thomas Berkeley Street, and it's still there. I see it when I drive by. It's pretty neat. And I remember he had these big beams coming across, and he invented some kind of wooden saddle so people could scoot across the beam and do work and stuff like that. I thought it was pretty cool, but he hasn't done anything like that probably since then, perhaps because he couldn't figure out how to make it work financially, or also perhaps because he's a roofer, but, and he needs to be closer to the roof. I mean, essentially it was over a roof, and it was way over these air conditioners and things like that. But I think what you guys are doing is pretty cool with these rooftop canopies. And seriously, I'm interested in looking at seeing how we could do it on this solar training center. So I need some shade, and I need to put some PV somewhere.
There you go,
and
man.
show it off. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's do it. All right. Any famous last words?
Just good luck to everybody out there. It's ups and downs of the solar biz, but I think we all know we're on the right track. So hang in there and let's crush in 26.
All right. Yeah. Crush it in 26. You heard it from T.R. Ludwig and Gaelen McKee of Brooklyn Solar Works. That's brooklynsolarworks.com. And make sure to get yourself a canopy before I do. I dare you. And thanks for being on the show. And thank you for listening to Shawn White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. If you want to learn more, go to SolarSEAN. That's SolarSEAN.com. And get yourself NABCEP certified. And you could learn about all the technical stuff about racking systems and rooftops and penetrations and rules in the National Electrical Code for carports. And also another reason to get yourself NABCEP certified is it's great for job security, doubling your salary, making yourself 3 times more valuable to the company. All right, everybody got that? Woo! Woo! Over and out.